The grocery store buzzed with the usual evening rush, carts squeaking, cash registers beeping, and the low hum of conversations filling the air. But at checkout lane 3, the noise faded into a deafening silence for one young woman. Emily stood clutching her newborn, her trembling hands reaching into a small purse. She laid down handfuls of quarters, nickels, and dimes, each coin clinking against the counter like an echo of her exhaustion. Her baby stirred softly against her chest, a fragile reminder of why she was there. Emily had skipped meals, pawned the last of her jewelry, and searched every corner of her apartment just to scrape together enough for a single can of baby formula. But as the digital numbers flashed on the register screen, her heart sank. She was still short. Her face flushed with embarrassment as the line behind her grew restless, strangers sighing, some shaking their heads. She whispered an apology to the cashier, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. For Emily, this moment wasn't just about formula, it was about her dignity, her will to keep going, and her desperate hope that tomorrow might hold something better. Just as she fumbled to count the coins again, praying for a miracle, she didn't notice the tall man in line behind her leaning closer, his gaze steady but kind, as if he had already decided what he was about to do. The man behind her had been watching quietly, his leather briefcase at his side and a crisp suit that marked him as someone worlds apart from Emily's struggle. Yet in that moment, he wasn't thinking about the conference call he had just left or the board meeting he was late for, he was thinking about the weight in her eyes. He noticed how her shoulders hunched, as though she was trying to make herself smaller, invisible, so no one would see her desperation. He thought about his own mother, who had once juggled 2 jobs and 3 children, making miracles out of pennies. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, leaning slightly so only Emily could hear. His voice was low, gentle, almost like a secret. "Put it on my card," he whispered. Emily froze, her breath catching as if time had stopped. She turned toward him, unsure if she had heard correctly. The cashier's eyes darted between them, waiting. The man gave a small nod, sliding his credit card across the counter as though it were the simplest thing in the world. Emily shook her head, stammering, I can't let you do that." But he only smiled, not with pity, but with quiet reassurance. "You don't have to let me," he replied softly. "Sometimes kindness doesn't ask for permission." The cashier rang up the formula, and the familiar beep of the scanner suddenly sounded like a lifeline. Emily's chest tightened, her heart pounding as relief and disbelief crashed over her. For the first time in months, she felt the world had seen her, not as a burden, but as someone worth helping. Emily's lips trembled as she whispered a thank you, clutching the can of formula like it was treasure. The baby stirred again, letting out a soft whimper, and Emily instinctively rocked him, blinking back the tears that now refused to stay hidden. The line behind them moved forward, and yet it felt like the entire store had paused to watch the quiet exchange. A woman further back sighed audibly, muttering something about handouts, but the man's calm expression never wavered. He didn't offer his name, didn't launch into a speech, didn't make her feel small. Instead, he met her gaze with a look that carried more than words, dignity, respect, and understanding. Emily wanted to explain, to tell him she had been working nights at a diner until her babysitter quit, that she'd applied to every job she could find, that she was trying so desperately to stand on her own 2 feet. But the lump in her throat made speaking impossible. As she gathered her things, the man gently tapped his briefcase against his leg, as though he was restless with a thought he hadn't yet shared. Then he said quietly, "When my mom was in your shoes, someone did the same for her. She never forgot it. Neither did I." His voice carried no arrogance, only gratitude for a kindness once given. Emily's breath hitched as she realized this moment was bigger than just groceries, it was a thread woven into a larger story of compassion passed forward. She didn't know who he was, or why fate had placed him behind her that evening, but she suddenly felt that her struggle was no longer invisible. Someone had noticed. Someone cared. As Emily adjusted her baby's blanket and prepared to leave, the man finally extended his hand. "I'm Daniel," he said simply, and though he didn't offer more, his tone carried a weight of humility. Emily hesitated, then shook it, feeling the warmth of someone who meant every word he spoke. She noticed the gleam of an expensive watch on his wrist, and the faint scent of cologne that suggested a life far removed from her own. Still, there was nothing distant about him in that moment. Before she could speak again, the cashier handed her the bag, and Daniel quietly added a few other essentials to the counter: diapers, wipes, even a pack of baby bottles. "Please, let me," he murmured when Emily shook her head again, overwhelmed. Her protests melted into silence, her gratitude too heavy for words. The line of shoppers began to shuffle impatiently, but one older man near the back gave a small nod of approval, as though he recognized the rare weight of what was happening. Daniel signed the receipt with a flourish and handed the bag to Emily himself, his eyes soft. "You'll get through this," he whispered, and something about the certainty in his voice made her believe it for the first time in weeks. Emily's knees nearly buckled from the rush of relief, but she steadied herself, clutching the formula close. In her heart, she knew she would never forget this night, not because of what she received, but because of the reminder that humanity still had the power to shine, even in the unlikeliest of places. Out in the parking lot, the evening air wrapped around Emily like a blanket, cool and steady, grounding her spinning emotions. She strapped her baby into the worn car seat, still trembling from the encounter. She wanted to call someone, to share what had just happened, but her phone was filled with unanswered job applications and missed calls from bill collectors. Instead, she stood there for a moment, staring at the glow of the store lights, holding on to the feeling Daniel's words had left in her chest. Then she noticed movement. Daniel wasn't walking toward a luxury car as she'd assumed. Instead, he was climbing into the back seat of a modest black sedan where a driver waited. As the doors shut, their eyes met one last time through the glass. He gave her a small wave, almost shy, and then he was gone. It wasn't until weeks later, when Emily's life had begun to steady with the help of a new job at a community center, that she saw his face again, this time on the news. Daniel Whitmore, CEO of one of the nation's largest companies, announcing a new initiative to provide childcare support for working families. Emily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. That was him. The stranger in line 3. She realized his act of kindness wasn't a random gesture from someone passing by. It was the quiet conviction of a man who had never forgotten his roots, someone who carried empathy into every corner of his life, even the checkout lane of a grocery store. Emily sat on her couch that evening, her baby cradled against her chest, watching the news segment play out. Tears slid down her cheeks, not from sadness this time, but from a surge of hope she hadn't felt in a long while. She thought about how one whispered sentence, "Put it on my card," had done more than just buy formula. It had reminded her that she wasn't alone in her fight, that compassion still existed in a world that often felt cold. Weeks of hunger, rejection, and humiliation had nearly convinced her that kindness was something she would never see again, yet there it was, handed to her at a grocery store checkout. She kissed her baby's forehead and whispered, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time, she believed it. From then on, Emily carried Daniel's gesture like a flame inside her, a light that guided her through difficult days. When she later saw another young mother struggling at the community center, Emily didn't hesitate. She shared her own groceries, echoing the same words Daniel had once told her: "Sometimes kindness doesn't ask for permission." The cycle of generosity continued, rippling outward in ways neither she nor Daniel could ever measure. For Emily, the act of one stranger had transformed into a lifelong reminder that humanity is strongest when we lift each other up. And for everyone who heard her story, it became proof that even the smallest choices, the quietest words, could change a life forever.